وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Today we will solve some exercises about how to graph sine and cosine functions. And let us start with this example or exercise. Checkpoint 6. Determine the amplitude, the period, and the phase shift of this function. So, and then graph one period of the function. So what is the amplitude? As we said before, the amplitude is absolute value of A. A here is 3 over 2, so the amplitude is 3 over 2. What about the period? The formula for the period is 2 pi over b, where b is the coefficient of x. The coefficient of x here is 2, so 2 pi over 2, it would be pi. So the period is pi. We usually need period over 4 to add to find the x values. So it's okay to find it here. Period over 4 would be pi over 4. This is important. We will use it to find the x values. And now we still need to find the phase shifts. How to find the phase shift? I solve the argument, which is 2x plus pi. I put it equal to 0, and I solve this equation for x. So if you solve it for x, you take pi to the other side, then you divide by 2. So you will have negative pi over 2. So this is what? This is x1. This is the first value of x. We start from here. And it's also the phase shift. So what is the phase shift? Pi over 2 units. You just say pi over 2. You don't say negative pi over 2. What about the negative? You say pi over 2 units left. So the negative will mean that you will go to the left. Nice. Now we can find the 5 key points. The first x value is negative pi over 2. I find the second one by adding period over 4, which is pi over 4. So if you add negative pi over 2 plus pi over 4 using the calculator, you will get negative pi over 4. Adding another pi over 4, you get 0. Adding another pi over 4 and another pi over 4. So it starts from pi over 2 to negative pi over 2. And you can check that you did not make a mistake by subtracting the last x value from the first x value, and the result should be the period. Okay, the period is pi, so pi over 2 plus pi over 2 would be pi, so that's correct. Now, how to find the y values? We are graphing cosine. You can use the calculator, and please just use the calculator to replace x by all of these values and you will get the answer. But if you know the graph of cosine and this is positive, then for cosine I have two x-intercepts at the second and the fourth key point, and here I have maximum, and the maximum is 3 over 2 because it is the amplitude, and in the middle I have a minimum, which is negative 3 over 2. So you can graph this function easily. I need, if this is 1 and this is 2, so this is 3 over 2, and this is 1 and this is 2, so this is negative 3 over 2. The range would be from negative 3 over 2 to 3 over 2. The unit of measure is pi over 4. So I graph pi over 4 to the right. It's also here, pi over 4. And the last key point is pi over 2. I need 0 and I need negative pi over 4 and negative pi over 2. And the period starts from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. What is the graph of cosine? Here I have maximum. Here I have maximum. At 0 I have minimum. And here I have x-intercepts. So this is a minimum, so the graph will go like this. This is a maximum, so the graph would be like this. And this is the maximum, so the graph would be like this. And this would be the graph of cosine x in this period. Not cosine x, I mean this function in this period. I will leave this to you. Please do it similarly. Also this one, Okay, do it similarly. We have solved a lot of exercises. I think this is 2. We solve it. Let us solve 51. Okay, let us solve this exercise. What is the amplitude? The amplitude is absolute value of A, which is 2, so the amplitude is 2. What is the period? The period is 2 pi over 2 pi, and it would be 1. So the period is 1. So period over 4 is just 1 over 4. So this is my increment. Now to find the phase shifts, I solve this equation to 2 pi x plus a to pi equals 0. If you take a to pi to the other side and divide by 2 pi, you will get negative 4. So negative 8 pi over 2 pi is negative 4. So I will start from negative 4, and the phase shift would be 4 units left. Okay, now how to find the x values? The first x is, we said, negative 4, and we will add 1 over 4. Negative 4 is negative 16 over 4. So adding 1 over 4 would be negative 15 over 4. Then negative 14 over 4. Then negative 13 over 4. Then negative 12 over 4. And these are the 5 key points, the 5x values. And if you subtract, this is actually negative 3. Negative 12 over 4 is negative 3. If you subtract negative 3 minus 4, you will get 1, which is the period. So that's good. Now, what about y? What are the y values? Again, this is cosine, and it is positive. So we will have 0 here, 0 here, maximum here, maximum here, and minimum here. And now we can graph. But you have to pay attention now, because the unit of measure is 1 over 4, and we need to graph from negative 4 to negative 3. So if this is negative 1, and this is negative 2, and this is negative 3, so this would be negative 4. Okay, so negative 4 is here, negative 4. And you need negative 3.5, which is 14 over 4, 7 over 2. This is negative 7 over 2. And here we have negative 13 over 4. And here we have negative 15 over 4. So these are the five key points: negative 4, negative 15 over 4, negative 7 over 2, negative 13 over 4, and negative 3. And the maximum and the minimum, the maximum is 2, and the minimum is negative 2, and the range is from negative 2 to 2. At negative 4, we have a maximum, and also here we have a maximum. At the middle, we have a minimum, and here we have x-intercepts, and the graph, this is a maximum, this is a maximum, this is a minimum. So the graph would be like this. So any cosine will have the same graph, but these 5 values of x will be different, and the range would be different. But at the end, you will have this graph if you graphing positive cosine, and it would be reflected about the x-axis if you are graphing negative cosine. Now let us come to this kind of questions, which really needs you to understand the difference between the graph of sine and the graph of cosine if you want to solve this question easily. Now, what is the question here? Find an equation for this graph. So the graph is given, and I need you to find the equation. Now, you studied only sine and cosine, and you know that this graph could be a graph of sine or a graph of cosine. But what is the easiest way to solve this question? To concentrate here from 0 to 1 complete period. Where would be 1 complete period? Is the period from 0 to 2 pi? Is the graph finished from 0 to 2 pi? Of course not. So a complete period would be up to 4 pi. This graph now, this graph is the graph in a complete period. So immediately you know from here that the period of this graph must be 4 pi. Okay, so we know that the period is 4 pi. Of course, if you start from here to determine the period, if you start from here, you have to end up here, no problem. But this 3 pi and pi also you will get 4 pi. Always the period is 4 pi. It is easier for you if you start from 0. From 0 to 4 pi. If you start from this point, where is the point again? The same point again, you will get the period. All right. What about the amplitude? Do you see the amplitude from here? Yeah, the amplitude is 3. Okay, so you know here that A could be 3 or -3. Now, this graph, is it a graph of sine or cosine in the same interval from 0 to 4 pi? Is it a graph of sine or cosine? If you know the two graphs, you will know that this is a graph of cosine. So you will consider the function y equals a cosine bx. And here you will not talk about c because you started from 0 and cosine at 0 is 1. So there is no horizontal translation here. Okay, if you start from 0. But if you want to use sine, then you will have to consider c because at 0 sine will never be 3. At 0 sine is 0. But the easiest way is to solve it like this: y equals a cosine bx without any c. C here would be 0. What is a? Now, is this a positive cosine or a positive sine? If you know the two graphs, you should always remember that the graph of cosine is like this, and the graph of sine is like this. If you remember these two facts, you will know that this is cosine and this is sine. You need to remember this fact. So this is a positive cosine. So A here is 3. The amplitude is 3 and A is 3, positive. And B, how to find B now? Okay, how to find this B? Okay, what do you know? I know that the period is 4 pi, and I know that the period is 2 pi over B. That's the definition of the period. It's 2 pi over b, and it is 4 pi from the graph. So how to solve this equation for b? You can interchange b and 4 pi. So b would be 2 pi over 4 pi. Okay, so b would be half. Pi cancels with pi, and b is half. You have b, you have a, so the equation y is 3 cosine half x, or x over 2. This is the equation. If you graph this equation, you will get this graph. Let us solve another one. Concentrate here. This is another question. Just start always from 0 for simplicity. Okay, if you start from here, continue up until you reach the same point again. So this is the same point again. Now, if you continue, you will graph again the same period. So what is the period here? I think you see that the period is from 0 to pi, complete period. All right. What is the amplitude? It is 2. Absolute value of A, 2, from 0 to 2. Good. Now, the most important point. Is this a graph of sine or cosine? It is not cosine. We don't have like this. And it is not like this. Okay. It is like this. So what is this? Okay, this is the graph of sine x. You should know that the graph of negative cosine x would be like this. Reflection about the x-axis. And negative sine x would be like this. Okay, so you need to remember these 4 graphs: sine, negative sine, cosine, negative cosine. So It's clear if you know this graph that this is exactly negative sine x. So A here is -2. Amplitude is 2, but A is -2 because we have a negative sign. All right. Now we need to find, so we need to consider this function y equals A sine bx, or we can say -2 in this case. I am considering this function, -2 sine b of x. And just I need to determine b. So how to determine b? As usual, what is the period? The period is 2 pi over b. And at the same time, I found from the graph that the period is pi. So how to find b? We interchange b and pi. So b would be 2 pi over pi. So b is 2. So the function is -2 sine 2x. This is the function that has this graph. All other questions, you can do this one. It is similar, 65. And please also solve this exercise. So we solved all different exercises in this PDF. That's the end of section 5.2. And if you have any question, please ask.